The Crossett Story. The beginning of forestry in southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana. Note: the following story is from Russell Reynolds and his contemporaries, but in particular the story is based on R. Reynolds' telling of the beginning of Crossett's forestry program. Introduction. The history of forestry in southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana is deeply intertwined with the story of Crossett. This essay explores the early days of sawmilling, the challenges faced by the industry, and the eventual adoption of sustainable forestry practices. In the beginning, cut out and get out. Quote, sawmilling of the virgin shortleaf and loblolly pine timber in southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana began on a large scale in the 1890s. Mills cutting upward of 50,000 board feet per day were common, with one located every 30 to 40 miles. Due to the high demand for logs and the absence of logging trucks, all large-scale logging was done by railroad. Teams of oxen or horses were used to skid the logs to the spurs, where steam-operated loaders placed them on log cars for transportation to the mill. The timber industry boom. Although some stands of timber had as much as 26,000 board feet per acre, the average usable timber was about 7,000 board feet. By the late 1920s, the end of the big cut was near, and by 1930 many mill owners started looking westward for new operations. Many families had moved into the uplands of southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana, homesteading and establishing farms long before the arrival of the big sawmills. To these farmers, trees were obstacles to be cleared for row crop. The Crossett Lumber Company. The Crossett Lumber Company set up a land office in Hamburg, Arkansas, offering $2.50 per acre for the farmer's timber or timberland. This offer attracted many small timberland owners eager to sell their land. As late as 1933, many people considered timberland to be wild and undeveloped, valuable only when cleared for pasture or cropped. Challenges of second-growth timber. When logging of the virgin timber began on a large scale, no one considered developing the second-growth stands. Slow-growth virgin lumber was the only kind deemed suitable for construction. Second-growth lumber was considered practically worthless due to its tendency to warp, shrink, or twist. Consequently, smaller pines and hardwoods were often cut and used for ballast and rough ties for the spur logging railroads. Fire and regeneration. Once the pine slashings dried out, they would catch fire, killing many smaller seedlings, saplings, and poles. Despite the lack of organized fire protection, many smaller pine trees survived the fires, grew rapidly, and began to produce seed. Seedlings sprang up, and thin but respectable young pine stands developed on many cut-over areas. Professional forestry comes to Crossett. For the few companies that did not fold when the virgin timber neared an end, managing second growth forests for timber production was a gradual decision. The Crossett Lumber Company continued to offer its cut-over land for sale and experimented with raising cattle. In 1927, some of the old cattle farm area east of Crossett was planted with pine trees, marking the first sizable loblolly pine plantation in the area. The role of professional foresters. The appointment of professional forester W.K. Williams in 1926 marked a significant step towards sustainable forestry. Williams proposed leaving pine seed trees during logging and promoting fire protection. Although he resigned in 1927, his successor A.E. Wackerman continued these efforts. Professor H. Chapman of Yale University also played a crucial role in creating interest in timber possibilities among the Crossett Lumber Company owners. Conclusion. The Crossett story is a testament to the resilience and adaptability of the forestry industry in southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana. From the early days of cut out and get out to the adoption of sustainable forestry practices, Crossett has played a pivotal role in the region's forestry history. The Crossett Story. The U.S. Forest Service comes to Crossett. Introduction. The Crossett Lumber Company played a pivotal role in the development of forestry practices in southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana. This essay explores the contributions of key figures, the challenges faced by the industry, and the eventual collaboration with the U.S. Forest Service to promote sustainable forestry. Early forestry efforts, under the general direction of Professor R.C. Bryant of Yale University, who served as a consultant for the Crossett Company, efforts were made to improve forestry practices. Professor Bryant worked closely with Levi Wilcoxon, the logging superintendent, who had foreseen the need for fire protection on company timberlands. Wilcoxon built 5 fire towers in strategic locations and connected them with a telephone system. However, these towers were not operational due to a lack of experience and training in fire protection. One of the first major tasks was to set up a fire protection system and get it working. Additionally, a cruise of 2 blocks of older cutover lands was conducted to determine the amount of second growth pine and hardwood, present growth and mortality rates, and the amount of remaining virgin timber. This information was used to prepare management and cutting plans. The U.S. Forest Service involvement. In July 1930, fresh out of the University of Michigan School of Forestry, I joined the Southern Forest Experiment Station. At that time, many large southern mills had closed and the production of lumber had been taken over by small mobile, peckerwood mills. The Southern Station's Economics Division focused on forest economics studies to inventory timber and timberland, determine growth possibilities, and assess the volume of forest products still being produced. The objective was to help save as many forest industry operations as possible through cooperative agreements with industries to inventory company forests, work out management plans, and conduct research studies, case studies, and cooperative agreements. The first case study was with the Ozark Badger Lumber Company at Wilmar, Arkansas. Information was gathered on volumes of merchantable pine and hardwood per acre, annual growth and mortality rates, and local volume tables. A management plan was suggested to allow a harvest of logs for the company sawmill while gradually improving and increasing the growing stock on the company's forest. This study aimed to demonstrate how the company could stay in business and increase the production of logs, lumber, and other products on a sustained yield basis. The Great Depression and its impact. The effects of the Great Depression, which started in 1929, were felt by the southern pine lumber industry. Both the price and demand for lumber dropped significantly. The Crossett Lumber Company responded by cutting costs drastically, including reducing salaries of forestry personnel by 50%. Despite these measures, the company's balance sheet showed red ink, leading to further salary cuts. Forester Wackerman, after experiencing drastic salary reductions, accepted an offer of employment with the Southern Station's Economics Division in New Orleans. Sustainable forestry practices. Wackerman's previous inventories of older second growth stands at Crossett indicated that the company might be able to implement radical changes in operating policy. He suggested stretching out the cut of the last 26,000 acres of virgin, culled virgin, and advanced second growth timber to produce high-grade lumber from virgin stands alongside lower-grade lumber from second growth stands. The Forest Service was willing to assist any timberland owner interested in sustained yield production of forest product. The Southern Station entered into a cooperative agreement with the Crossett Company to mark compartments of the remaining 26,000 acres known as the East Block for selective cutting and management. Selective logging study. In 1934, a selective logging study was approved, funded by the Charles Lathrop Pack Foundation. The study aimed to selectively log blocks of timber marked for the removal of various volumes of pine and hardwoods and determine the costs of felling, skidding, loading, hauling, and sawmilling. The selected area was located near Fountain Hill, Arkansas. The study involved using gasoline-powered trucks with small 2-wheel trailers and cross-haul loading with horses. Detailed records were kept for each stage of the operation, and costs and returns for trees of various sizes were summarized. Conclusion. The collaboration between the Crossett Lumber Company and the U.S. Forest Service marked the beginning of sustainable forestry practices in southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana. Through cooperative agreements, case studies, and selective logging studies, the industry was able to adapt to changing conditions and promote the long-term health of the forest. Crossett story. The Crossett Research Center and Experimental Forest. Introduction. The establishment of the Crossett Research Center and Experimental Forest marked a significant milestone in the development of sustainable forestry practices in southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana. This essay explores the early efforts, challenges, and achievements in creating this important research facility. Selective logging study. The selective logging study aimed to log blocks of timber marked for the removal of various volumes of pine and hardwoods and determine the costs of felling, skidding, loading, hauling, and sawmilling. The fieldwork was completed on November 25, 1936. Although the final report would not be completed for about 2 years, valuable information was available. This study was the first of its type in the country, and there was great demand for tables, data, and articles. Among these were local volume tables for second growth natural shortleaf loblolly pine by diameter, at breast height, D, B, H, and log length, and a local board foot volume table for second growth upland hardwoods. Data on yield by grade of lumber obtained from second growth trees and logs of various sizes were in high demand. The study found that small logs of all grades and rough and knotty logs were costing companies more than they were realizing from the lumber produced. However, if the logs were of reasonable size and grade, it would be profitable to selectively log as little as 750 board feet (doyle) per acre. Thinning dense spots of small trees for pulpwood and removing most hardwoods could improve the lightly stocked second growth stands for future management and growth. The Crossett Research Center and Experimental Forest. Before the marking of the first unit of the East Block was completed in 1933, the Crossett Lumber Company offered the Forest Service an area of about 3 sections of second growth timberland to be used as an experimental forest and research center. The location could be anywhere on the company's holdings. The search for a suitable location began on September 29, 1933, and the final decision was made in October 1933. The area to be developed into the Crossett Experimental Forest contained mainly natural stands of shortleaf and loblolly pine that had developed unaided since the virgin timber had been cut to a 14-inch stump diameter limit in 1915. Stocking varied greatly from acre to acre, with some areas having up to 5,600 board feet (doyle). The Crossett Lumber Company gave the Forest Service 1,680 acres of timberland outright, reserving the timber but offering a deal if the station returned a volume of timber equal to the volume on the area at the time of the agreement. In 20 years, the land and remaining timber would become the property of the government. Early development and challenges. By the end of 1933, it was agreed that much of the early research would focus on improving and rebuilding previously unmanaged second growth stands. The economics branch of the station would have general control of the research facilities. Development and the day-to-day operation would be under my direction. To provide good fire protection and ready access for research purposes, roads were planned to crisscross the area at half-mile intervals. Without funds, the station applied for a civilian work project (CWP) for road work, which was approved on December 16, 1933. The Crossett Lumber Company offered 3 of its logging camp supervisory force and Ike Rawls, who became a valued assistant. The first building, a temporary shed and office, was constructed in December 1933 and road construction began using manual labor with shovels, picks, and axes. Men were selected from relief roles from the Crossett area and as far away as Stillion on the Saline River. Despite the challenging conditions, the men worked long hours for $1.25 per day for a 4-day week. Conclusion. The establishment of the Crossett Research Center and Experimental Forest was a significant achievement in the history of forestry in southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana. Through selective logging studies, cooperative agreements, and the dedication of many individuals, the Research Center played a crucial role in promoting sustainable forestry practices and improving the management of second growth stands. The Crossett story. The development of the Crossett Research Center Introduction. The Crossett Research Center played a crucial role in advancing sustainable forestry practices in southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana. This essay explores the early efforts, challenges, and achievements in establishing this important research facility. Jasper Burns and the early days. Jasper Burns became a valuable permanent member of the Crossett research staff and worked for the government until his retirement many years later. His dedication and hard work were instrumental in the early development of the research center. Selection cutting and national interest. Word spread that the Crossett Lumber Company was considering selection cutting of their last remaining virgin and advanced second growth stands. The southern station had marked the first 2,500 acres for partial cutting, attracting visitors from across the country. My diary entry from May 26, 1931 notes a visit from several key figures in forestry, including Mr. Demon, director of the Southern Station, Mr. Watzik, one of the owners of the Crossett Lumber Company, and Mr. Silcock, chief of the U.S. Forest Service, among others. These visits highlighted the national interest in the innovative forestry practices being developed at Crossett. Challenges in railroad logging. Despite the interest, some Crossett officials were not satisfied that the second growth pine stands had enough volume per acre to permit railroad logging. They requested the Forest Service's assistance in updating the stand and growth figures for their 116,000 acres of second growth in the Nay and N.W. block. The company's new forester Albin G. Jacobson was assigned to the cutover land study. By early 1935, the stand and growth data had been updated, revealing that at least 2,500 board feet (doyle) per acre would be needed to make a railroad logging operation profitable. The company had doubts about the future of the sawmill business at Crossett and agreed to reduce their pine lumber production. Development of the research center. Progress at the future research center was made under considerable difficulty. The Southern Station staff favored developing a headquarters area with office and housing for technical and supervisory staff, as well as telephones, electric service, additional road construction, graveling, and other improvements. However, funds were extremely limited. Construction of the office and pump house began in August 1931 and was completed in about 3 weeks at a total cost of $2,400. Civilian Conservation Corps (CCC) and Federal Emergency Relief Administration (FERA). On September 24, 1934, work began on buildings to be used as winter quarters by the CCC crew, who were helping with a 100% inventory of timber on the experimental forest. The CCC boys from the Hamburg camp also helped survey the forest, drill a water well, and cut brush from the fire line. By the end of 1934, much of the 13 miles of pick and shovel built FERA roads were completed, with some receiving a thin layer of gravel. Works Progress Administration (WPA). The FERA was succeeded by the WPA, which provided funds for work on the experimental forest starting July 29, 1935. The WPA administration allowed the hiring of men with carpentry, log construction, and other skills along with common laborers. The WPA also provided funds for purchasing lumber, nails, and other materials. Long pine poles were used to construct various buildings, including a custodian cabin, bathhouse, superintendent's house, forester's residence, 4-car garage, and filling station. Construction of these log buildings began on September 30, 1935, and was largely completed by the middle of the summer of 1936. Research study areas. In the summer of 1935, the director of the Southern Station Division chiefs and research personnel agreed on the assignment of research study areas on the experimental forest. The areas included 80 acres left untouched as a natural area, 30 acres for a native tree arboretum, 80 acres for farm forestry studies, 280 acres for small plot test tube or fundamental studies, 880 acres for large compartment studies, 330 acres for administrative use and later assignment. Conclusion. The development of the Crossett Research Center was a significant achievement in the history of forestry in southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana. Through the dedication of many individuals and the support of various government programs, the Research Center played a crucial role in promoting sustainable forestry practices and improving the management of second growth stands.